Kevin, why don't you take us through kind of your background and just let us know where you're coming from in terms of your education and your background and what you're doing right now, and then we can jump into some good Q&A.
Sure. Um, so I currently work for the Office of Financial Research in the U.S. Treasury Department. I am the Senior Financial Data Specialist in the Data Operations Group within IT. I've been here for about 13 years now with the U.S. Treasury Department. Before that, I was working for NERA Economic Consulting. I was working there for their securities and finance practice. And in so doing, I was doing damages calculations behind the securities litigation that was going on. So it was an easy segue at that point, going from private sector to the public sector. I work a lot with data remediation, data collections, data governance and management, and a lot of work with the other regulatory agencies.
That's great. That's great. Can you walk us through what you do on a day-to-day basis? I know it's very technical and you're working with a lot of data and a lot of disparate systems and offices, but can you somewhat dumb it down for us for the layperson to understand what your day-to-day looks like and how you're interacting with your team?
Sure. So I think one of the best ways to explain it and how I was hired was we are the homeland security of the financial data world. So what that means is, we are tasked with working with other regulatory agencies. We collect their data. We also have two proprietary collections of our own that we have developed over the years. And one of our goals is to work with the data, find the linkages between it, and to kind of spit it out in a more usable format to either other regulatory agencies, the public. We have our own monitors that we're working on issues. So.
It's great. And it sounds like I think you mentioned you've been, working with this team for a little bit over 10 years. So, pre-COVID, COVID, and then post-COVID, it's kind of three different time periods. But can you talk about if you somewhat normalize that? I know it's hard to do that, but if you somewhat normalize kind of the COVID situation, can you describe your approach to management when you first started as that kind of startup mentality? And then how has it changed over time? Your beginning approach, kind of hands-on, you know, everybody's in a new startup atmosphere and how did you change your approach to managing these different people to where you are right now? So can you kind of walk us through that trajectory in a little bit?
Yeah, as we start off, it was very much, we just need to get things done. We're a new agency, we're trying to create a name for ourselves. So, it was very much just trying to get things done, and it was a little haphazard at first, to be quite honest. We were trying to find a footing and, create a name for ourselves. So, my management approach, especially over the years as I grew into this management role and as our team was growing, I think at first it was a little bit more collaborative. It wasn't really, um, you know, a managing kind of style. But as the team grew over the years, as I said, we grew kind of exponentially over the years. As we grew, kind of needed that kind of management structure to be able to coordinate and really work collaboratively and keep track of things as they were going on. And so as I grew into that role of the manager and, kind of our team was growing out, first started with, just about five, the team that I manage, and then it kind of grew now to where it is about eight or nine. Um,
So Kevin, we lost internet connection there for a second, but I think what you were walking through was how when you first started, you guys were more of a flat organization where everybody was adding value, and then as you grew as an organization and as a manager, you became a little bit more structured with a hierarchy where people would be directly reporting to you, and so it forced you, it sounds like, to really develop those managerial skills almost on the fly and have people adapt. Is that kind of a fair paraphrasing of what you were going through before we got interrupted?
yeah, yeah, and as I said, the managing style I think is, it's changed over the years, but also changes, with the different projects that I work on, different team members that I'm managing, and it's a very agile kind of thing. So the different styles work in different environments, and it's just something that you need to kind of constantly be modifying. And also keeping an eye on too. You have to see what works and what isn't. And it can change depending on team members and or projects. So
Yeah, it's tough because I think you talked about working in a hybrid environment right now when we jumped off. And so how do you manage communication in that kind of environment? Are you checking in with your team on a day-to-day basis? Is it weekly? Does it depend on the project? And then if you could just give us a couple kind of quick hits on what tools you use to speak with your team. A lot of people, well, some people do in person. Other people are using, Teams or Slack and chatting or text message or email. So can you guys talk through a little bit about how often you check in with your team and then what tools you're using to do that in an optimal way?
sure. So it depends on the project that we're working on. I have my core team. We have weekly meetings. So and it's we have both members in the New York office and the DC office. So it's something that I need to manage and make sure that everybody's seen and heard. Um, so I do weekly check-ins with my core team, and it's a time for everybody to kind of talk and share what they're working on. I think it's a time to learn from each other. So there's a lot of talking over situations that are coming up, talking about issues, problems that they're developing and having. And there's a lot of times we find that somebody else has encountered the same issue or knows who to reach out to solve the issue. It could be when you're talking about some data program or a Python program that's not working. Somebody has a code for it. Or you can reach out to this guy in IT. So it's something that it's a good time to share. I try to keep it to a quick half-hour meeting. I don't want to run over and get too in depth. If it's kind of going off on a tangent, I try to rein it back in, or set aside a different time to talk about a certain issue that's maybe coming up in a project that's not so relevant to the whole group. For other projects, it depends on the time frame of it. As I said, we have a lot of monitors and data that are coming in that are more of a monthly or quarterly kind of approach. So those we do, less frequent check-ins, but I don't want to inundate everybody with meetings. So that's something that often happens in the government. But as we go along, there's different ways to check-ins. Emails is one way of doing it, but we work primarily with Teams. So Teams chats and Teams meetings. Um, that's primarily how we set up our calls. I promote and encourage and borderline require, leaving the cameras on. Even though we're working in a hybrid environment or in different offices, it's kind of important to see each other. And as far as like how we communicate, as I said, it's Teams chats. We have Jira dashboards that we like to use, which is a good way to monitor different projects, assign tasks to different people we
Okay,
communicate.
that's great. And we got a couple minutes left here, so just wanted to understand how when things aren't going right within your team,
Mhm.
and your team's encountering stress and somebody's making a mistake on your team, how do you address that? And then the second part of the question is, you know, that's when you're dealing with employees. Sometimes that's a lot easier than when you make a mistake yourself. And so, how do you address the two? And so, when the employee makes a mistake, how do you address that employee? How do you address the mistake? And then, when you make a mistake and you make a management decision that doesn't go the right way, how do you manage that within the team and navigate that tricky scenario?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. And mistakes are going to happen. Um, and I think I fostered a very collaborative work environment with our team. We know that we need to be agile. We know that we need to adapt to new situations, but issues are still going to arise. And whether it's personalities clashing, or somebody's maybe work isn't up to par or it's taking too long. I don't like to call out individuals, especially in a group setting. But we do talk about the work and see where there are bottlenecks and see where maybe we can, um, help each other out. As I said. Um, But if there are more issues or clashes between different people, it's good to kind of take that off to the side. I think take it out of the group setting, talk to people one on one. And we're still people in the end, and you got to recognize that there might be something else going on, personally or professionally that's affecting their work. And sometimes just talking about it, helps you know the employee, kind of recognize maybe where they're, could increase their efficiency, and increase their, communication and maybe, get some help. So I like to take that off on the side, one-on-ones, especially if it's personalities clashing or issues between some team members. Sometimes it's good just to get them into a room and talking, and a lot can get lost through emails and communications like that, and through IMs. So it's good to kind of talk it out, and I find that that's helped resolve a lot of issues. Just talking out and kind of seeing where the other person's coming from. It
Sure.
sounds kind of cliche, but it actually is effective and it helps.
Absolutely.
You talked about that's from a more managing team members and issues that are coming up there. There are plenty of times when I make mistakes too. I think nobody's without fault. So it's everybody makes mistakes and it happens, and I think it's good um, to address that head on, and show some accountability. It's within team members and within management, myself. So if something does happen, and as I said, sometimes you just need to make decisions and move on, but then you realize that maybe you should have taken another look at another approach, and you need to backtrack. And it happens. It's something that I think it's important to kind of recognize it, not let it linger, and go. Be so committed to a decision that you end up taking twice as much time to resolve an issue or a mistake that's been made. So it's good. It's good time to be accountable, address the issue and move on. It's nothing that you need to dwell on, but it shows accountability, for myself, for my team members, and that it's okay to make mistakes, learn from them, and move on. So it's going to happen. And as I said, just fostering that agile and adaptive environment and accountability is a decent way of addressing that.
That's great. So Kevin, one more quick question here as we wrap up. In terms of your collaborative approach with your team, it sounds like you're hands-on and you give them a lot of feedback, which is really great. How do you foster career growth? When you're doing so much in data every single day, right? I can imagine it sometimes you can get lost in the day to day. And so how do you take a step back, foster career growth, help them with career advancement, keep them motivated every year, because when you're deep in the trenches, sometimes you can lose focus and sight and you look up and a year's gone by. So how do you do that and motivate them?
Yeah, it's tough. As I said, a lot of our, the work that we do deals with data, it deals with it on a databases, a daily basis. And so it's tough. You sometimes, lose sight of things, and you're so focused on the work you're doing, you forget the kind of the bigger picture. And it's important, I think, sometimes to take a second, recognize that we really do strive to do. It's something it's tough. There's within the government itself, it's tough to have a lot of promotions. Our structure is a little bit different than the private sector, but we really encourage a lot of training, both on site with we have a lot of programs internally, but also externally between going to conferences, working on making those connections. We have classes you can take. We have a certain stipend, and we really do encourage that, and allow for time off, to create that kind of personal growth. We have, individual development plans, IDPs that we really encourage, that's separate from the individual's work. We want to see where everybody wants to be and wants to be going. So we want to, create that kind of collaborative environment. And, it's something that, you know, it, you never want to be training somebody to leave, but, I think it's when people do leave, and it happens, it's never as you want to be happy for the person. You know, you see that personal growth, you know, and I kind of own a part of it, you know, and